Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural commentator. And today we're going to do a movie review from a spiritual, moral, Christian perspective of the movie Civil War. I think some of you have heard of this movie. It's only been out a couple weeks now, Civil War, and it's already gotten a lot of talk on the internet. It's not as big at the box office as you might have thought, because basically it does a bait and switch a little bit. When you think of Civil War, for example, you think of the division in our country right now between the blue states and the red states, between the liberal leftists and the conservative Christian Republicans versus the Democrats. You see a 50-50 split pretty much right on down the population here in the United States. We saw that in the last 2020 presidential election where it was so close and there was almost a 50-50 split between the leftist liberals, Democrats, and the right red state Republicans. And so you would think that if you were going to have a movie named Civil War, it would be between the conservatives and the conservatives and the Democrats, the liberals. But that is not the case in this movie. So it's a little bit of bait and switch. You go into it thinking, okay, I think I know what this is about. And then it actually shows you that you don't know what it's about. Because in this movie, we don't really know why there is a civil war in the United States. We don't know the context. We don't know what is actually happening. We don't know why some of these states have succeeded. For example, right here, it says 19 states have succeeded. I have the trailer pulled up here. We'll look at that, and then I'll comment on it. But the movie is surprising in the fact that it doesn't go into the political division that we have in our country right now. And I think one of the reasons why the directors, the producers, the writers, and the theater company who put this out did not want to alienate half of the United States. They wanted the box office draw to come from Republicans and Democrats, from red states to blue states, from the far left to the far right. They want everyone to see this movie. So they didn't want to create a movie where it enrages one half of the population and really produces a lot of happiness in the other half. There probably are going to be movies made on the same subject we're talking about that do that, but this one doesn't. It's very neutral. In fact, it's so neutral. It's so ambiguous. It's so fuzzy. Nobody knows what the fighting is for. Nobody knows what the causes are, the issues are. It's very hard to evaluate the movie because you're like, what are we fighting here for? What's this? What's going on? Why are they attacking Washington? Why do they want to, and we'll get to this later in the movie, why do they want to shoot the President of the United States? We get little clues, we get little hints, but really it's pretty much through the whole movie, you don't know why there is a civil war going on in the country. Now, the movie does depict that there are 4 basic zones, and they're not totally geographical, but they are somewhat geographical. There is California and Texas have an alliance that they've made between them, and that's very strange. And in our context today with the political scenes, California is so different from Texas. California, a radical blue state, liberal, leftist, Democrat-controlled, versus today in our society, red state, Texas, conservative, Republican. Yet in the movie, those states are aligned. Now, why would Texas and California align themselves up and in an alliance? And then Florida has its own alliance. And then there's a northern alliance up Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, that kind of scenario. Then there's a Midwestern, middle of the country that is still loyal to the Washington, D.C. Capitol, the White House, the president, and so on and so forth. So you have this big middle of the country neutral zone that is still aligned with the existing government in Washington, D.C. So that's weird. Now, how did that come about? What's the backstory? It'd be very interesting to have a second movie, a sequel, a prequel, I guess they call it, and explain the backstory behind how all of these different alliances came to be and what the issues were. So we don't know those in the movie. So if you come into the movie saying, hey, I wonder if this is going to be conservative versus liberal, no, it's not. What is it then? Nobody knows. I mean, at least the audience doesn't know. I don't even know if the writers and directors know. They just wrote it the way they wrote it. And so it's basically about photojournalists wanting to interview the president. And so they're going across the country in a van, and they're headed toward Washington, D.C. to try to get an interview with the president. And they're taking pictures all along the way, and they're showing you what the landscape is like. And it's somewhat interesting, although it does have a lot of the cliches and the DEI, woke, far left of Hollywood in it all over the place. So it's coming from a woke, liberal, leftist Hollywood scene, and they're interpreting reality in this fictitious movie about civil war. But there actually is a civil war going on. There are soldiers, and they're shooting, and they're fighting against one another. It's kind of hard to find out which side is actually which, and who's fighting who, and why are they fighting. It's all kind of mixed up and jumbled, but these photojournalists are trying to take pictures of it all. And so we'll get into that. But let me roll the clip here, the trailer, and then I'll stop it at certain points and make some comments.
States have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything.
Three-term president. So that's a little bit of a clue. The president is on his third term. Well, as you all know, the Constitution only allows for 2 terms now. Now, it was that FDR, I think he was a 4-term president, but after that, there was an amendment, and it states only that a president can serve only 2 terms. So this president is somewhat acting illegal, you might conclude from that third-term president. So maybe that's the issue. The president would not leave office. Now, if that were the issue, then you could draw parallels to a lot of the liberal leftist Democratic fears that Trump wouldn't leave office, and that if he were elected a second term, that he might not want to leave office at the end of a second term. And it would buy into this whole Trump derangement syndrome that's on the left, where everything Trump does is a crisis, and it's the worst thing that could possibly happen. And if you elect Trump again, then he will push for a third term, and if he gets voted out, he'll still stay. And yeah, there is a lot of parallels between the president in this movie and Donald Trump. And I believe the writers and directors actually wanted to make that symbol, this president, who there are different factions of the Civil War are trying to kill and capture, capture or kill. And that's why they're descending on Washington, D.C., trying to take over and oust him from the presidency. So maybe in the movie, that was the whole crisis. It was a constitutional crisis. A president would not leave office after he had his second term, and he ran again, and he was actually elected for a third term, which is illegal. So maybe that's the problem. I don't know. But there is somewhat of a parallel between this president in the movie and Trump. And of course, if you're a leftist, if you're a liberal, if you're a Democrat, all of the Trump derangement syndrome fears would then kick into place, and you would then justify, oh yeah, they have to kill him. They have to get rid of him. Because as we all know now, in reality, the Democrats are trying to get rid of Trump any means they can, legal or illegal. And so that's why they're trying to prevent him from running for a second term, because they're going after him legally to try to catch him on some technicality. They're trying to throw the book at him in some petty almost the equivalent of a jaywalking charge and keep them off the ticket. So, yeah, this movie does have a little bit of a parallel with today's world, but it's not very clear-cut.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
Okay, so they do cross the country in this van, these photojournalists, and we just saw a scene there where they walk into this one town and everybody acting like there's nothing happening. A lot of apathy, a lot of unconcerned about the fact that there's a big civil war going on in their country. And that probably would actually happen in real life if there were a prolonged civil war in this country, because a lot of people would just not want to bother to get involved. They may just figure, especially the Gen Z and the millennials, the apathy there would be like, just let me do my thing, leave me alone. Yeah, there are soldiers fighting somewhere and there are troops fighting against each other and they're trying to do something, but just let me live my life. And I'm going to live in denial as long as I can. As long as it's not right in front of me and there are not bullets and bombs exploding in front of me, then I'm going to pretend that nothing is happening. And there are some people actually living that way today where they're totally disconnected to what are the issues of the, for example, coming up presidential election. They don't even know. A lot of younger people have just checked out. There's just nihilism and apathy and just unconcern about the future. They don't have much hope. The economy is really doing a number on their attempts to purchase homes and buy vehicles and even pay rent, and wages are not keeping up with inflation. So a lot of younger people, younger generations, are doing exactly what that girl did in the scene there. They said, well, don't you realize there's a civil war going on? Well, we just think it's for the best. We just hope the best side wins or whatever. It's just that apathy. That is probably, unfortunately, something that would happen.
Citizens of America, the so-called Western forces of Texas and California have suffered a very great defeat.
So that's the Trump figure, and you can see how he even kind of looks like Donald Trump. So that's not a very hidden message. They're actually trying to say the bad guy, the bad president, is a Trump figure. And now this is the main character of the movie, and she is a photojournalist. Now the problem is that this actress, Kirsten Dunst, is actually in her 40s, but she looks like she's like in her 50s or even 60s in some of the scenes. It's her face is so old and wrinkled, and she looks like she's cynical and weathered and just tired and very skeptical of truth and anything. But she's going to go in and be a part of the team that interviews the president. And then there's a sidekick, a younger girl that sees this woman here as a role model and wants to tag along, and they take her along. So that's what's happening with the photojournalist. Then there's the driver, and he is a photojournalist himself, and he's pretty much there. He's going to provide protection if he can for them.
At the hands of the United States military.
Mr. President, do you regret the use of airstrikes against American citizens?
Okay, so that could possibly be one of the causes of the war. The president here is said to have used airstrikes against American citizens. So there was something that caused the president of the United States to have airstrikes on the citizens of this country. That might have really bothered a lot of people, for example, in Texas and California and other places, to secede from the Union. And so there's a big crisis going on in this movie, disunity, chaos in some places. And as you see here, there's looting and troops, and it's a mess. It's a mess. And it actually could happen in this country, unfortunately. because of the great division we have between, essentially, we have the leftist, radical, Democratic Party who's wanting to push the nation in a secular, humanistic, almost atheistic direction, heavily socialist, heavy totalitarian, big government control, immoral, pro-abortion, pro-LGBTQ. And then there is the more traditionalist America, Judeo-Christian values, family values, God, the Bible, church, Christian moral standards, Christian ethical principles. Marriage is between a man and a woman only, and sex before marriage is sin. And so wanting to maintain the moral order versus the radical leftist Democrats who don't care about Christian values. They want to make up their own rules, and they think they can do something better than the United States has right now. And it's based on basically secular principles and relativism, moral relativism. And they're dividing the country, and that's the real division right now at this time. So, yeah, there could be a real civil war develop in our country if the sides got to the point where there just could not be coexistence. You know, and it's very hard to say this, but I think that could actually happen. For example, even with the abortion issue. I mean, you're killing babies in the womb. You're murdering children in the womb. Now, on that issue, you're either for the babies or you're against the babies. You're either for abortion or you're against abortion. So these are, and the same way with the LGBTQ movement. If you are a traditional Christian, Bible-believing person, you're not going to put up with all that gender-bending confusion between male and female and all of the rest of the nonsense. But if you're a leftist, that's what you want. You want to dismantle Christianity, and that's one of the ways you can do it. So, yeah, there are some brewing issues that could actually cause and spark a civil war.
They're moving to D.C. today.
We need to go down there.
They shoot journalists on sight in the Capitol. Every instinct in me says this is death. Flooded.
Every time I survived the war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home.
So that was the young girl who's the sidekick who's trying to learn from the veteran photojournalist. And they stumble upon a scene where there was a store, and the people of the town or the owners of the store actually caught some vandalism, and they strung them up. They hung them and killed them. So you have a lot of vigilante justice, a lot of citizen justice. You have a lot of lawlessness and just people taking things into their own hands. And that was part of the whole traveling across the country. You would see pockets of lawlessness and anarchy, so to speak, where it was basically might makes right. You know, if you have the weapons, you have the guns, then you can maintain your will against the will of anyone else. So that actually could happen, again, in a real civil war.
I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this. But here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What?
Okay, in this scene, and, you know, of course, these are spoilers. In this scene, they run into some vigilante soldiers, and this guy with the gun is actually questioning people who come into this area, and he's saying, are you a real American or not? Where are you from? Are you from this country? And if you're from one of the states of this country, he lets you live. If you're a foreigner, if you're from outside of the country, you get shot on sight. Okay, he's taking the law into his own hands. Now, again, this is sort of a symbol of the way the liberal leftist Democrats want to say Republicans and Trump and conservatives are toward foreigners, because they want to open the border up. The liberal leftist Democrats want to open the border up, let people from all kinds of nations just flood the country, And so this scene, I think, is sort of a dig at conservatives trying to preserve the border in the south between us and Mexico. And so you might call this a sort of a political scene, because there are no conservatives that I know of that actually want to shoot foreigners and purge the country of everyone born outside of the country. That's totally unrealistic. But here in this Civil War movie, that's what this scene is all about. And it is a pretty chilling scene. Hopefully, we would never get to the point where people are just killing people for being a certain nationality or not. But again, we don't know the context. Was there an invasion? Was there a infiltration of terrorists from other countries? We don't know the whole context again.
You're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you? You don't know?
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
Oh my God.
Get in the car!
So the Western nations, Western Alliance, I guess, is invading Washington, D.C. in the movie. And so the photojournalists grab their gear and they head on in with the Western Alliance troops to go and capture or kill the president.
Get in the car! Move, move, move!
You're gonna hang back.
I'm not hanging back.
One nation.
So here's the president, and he's still in the White House. And what is so weird is that these women, these photojournalists, they are stationing themselves right in the middle of the capture of the White House. So they're right there, and bullets are flying. And I can tell you one thing. I don't think most photojournalists would be on the front line going in and having bullets pass right next to their head or stepping in front of bullets. And that's what these photojournalists are doing. And not only that, they're women who are doing it. And that is totally unnatural. So this whole idea that you're going to put yourself in the line of fire to get a picture and have these women do that, that's not realistic. I don't know many women who would pick up a camera and want to go to the very front of the fighting and get in the line of fire and risk their lives just to get a picture of something.
Hanging back.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So they wind up invading the White House and shooting all the Secret Service, and then they get to the president's Oval Office and they grab him and actually execute him. And again, that's a woman soldier who does that. So a lot of the real tough guy, you might say, tough gal acting parts are these women in these positions. And it's somewhat unrealistic that you would have journalists allowed to go in there with these operations like that. And then also that the women would be the ones on the front line doing all the actual major activity, like shooting the president. And one of them actually gets shot. So one of the photojournalists. So very woke, very feminist, girl boss kind of a idea here. But the idea of Civil War, it does capture some pretty scary ideas that, yeah, this could actually happen.
God bless America.
And the thing about it is that it could start with some dumb little thing. It could start, for example, where there is someone who is shot. It could be, like, for example, Ronald Reagan got shot when he was a president. It could be something like Trump is shot, or it could be something like Trump is arrested, the day before the election. And it just really angers people who are planning on voting for Trump or already did vote for Trump. And so they blame the Democrats for rigging the election by arresting Trump or throwing Trump in jail. Or it could be that some of conservative red state Army or Air Force or military bases rebel against Biden if that were to happen with Trump being arrested, and they would go into the jail or prison where Trump is and break him out. And you could have, for example, Army bases and military bases, Fort Knox, Fort Benning, Georgia. You could have all kinds of military people involved in different factions in the United States who are no longer taking orders from Washington, D.C. Yeah, that is very possible. And it would be a complicated mess because we don't have, for example, during the original Civil War in the country, the North versus South, we don't have a Mason-Dixon line. We don't have a clear demarcation of economic and political regions like South and North. In the next Civil War, if we ever had one, it'll be a complicated mess where you have pockets of this forces over here in this area of the country, and then you have another pocket here, and then you might have large sections of one faction, and it would be a real chaotic mess. So hopefully it will never come to that. Hopefully we won't ever see fighting in the streets of our cities. Hopefully we won't see the presidents dropping bombs on U.S. citizens, and we wouldn't see a invasion of Washington, D.C., where an army takes the White House and then storms the Oval Office and kills the president. And hopefully it would never come to that, but it actually is possible. So as Christians, we have to pray for the peace of the city. The Bible talks about pray for the peace of the city that you live in. And it talks about in Jeremiah, he says to plant crops and marry and have children and raise them and do the best and pray for the peace of the city, for the prosperity of the nation, because if it prospers, you prosper, and to be good citizens and bring the love of Christ and the truth of Christ to bear. That doesn't mean that revolution and civil war is always not an option. It just means that we have to be at peace with all men if as much as possible, the Bible teaches us. So we have to be peacemakers as much as possible. Now, but there are circumstances, and that's the scary part, there are circumstances where war would be justified in certain situations. And we just need to pray that it never gets to that point here in our own country, because we've seen around the globe there are countries that do have civil war, especially in Africa, for example. Some of those African countries have gone through civil war. We've seen that in Eastern Europe, a lot of civil war. And we even see that war in Ukraine right now. So there's a whole context to this, and the scary part is that civil war is actually a possibility in our country. We just need to pray that it never becomes an actuality in our country, and we never actually see fighting in the street, and we never actually see Americans fighting against Americans. That would be a tragedy. So hope that was a decent review, and we'll see you back next week.